The biggest news in commodity trading this past week has been the extraordinary rally in grain prices. A mid-year price jump is not that unusual, but Pro Farmer has called the rally blistering, and others have settled for one of the strongest June futures performances on record. And the reason can be summed up with just one word, and that's weather. Hot, dry conditions are extending over more and more of the United States, and similar droughty weather through Ukraine and southern Russia. Yields in Russia are said to be down 30 to 40%. So the markets reacted. In Chicago, the bulls were all over wheat, corn and oilseeds. Buying was described at one stage as frenzied, as traders picked over yield and planting information from all parts of the world. The consensus is supplies are already tight, and weather concerns are so serious there's even talk of America actually running out of corn. July contracts expired during last week, but these prices for September are 15% up, and August delivery oilseeds had a similar lift. The feeling is even rain right now across those drought areas will not make that much difference. As usual, traders in Australia were well aware of the Chicago action, plus there's a growing cautious optimism about the season ahead, especially if the East Coast wheat belt rain tipped for this week eventuates. So both East and Western wheat lifted. The prices in this week of last year were at least $40 less. Let's quickly check how prices have changed with a look at what's been on offer for East Coast wheat. Here's the graph of prices for the last 12 months or so, and you can see fairly flat along here, in fact very light trading, and here's where the weather concerns started, and up it goes. A crucial point being made by most traders at the moment is that producers should be wary about selling into this rally, and there are two reasons. Prices are likely to go even higher, and your wheat is a long way from in the bin. Spot prices tracked upwards as well last week. Demand appears firm. That sorghum price looks especially inviting. In fact, it's spiked $42 in just 2 weeks. Moving on to livestock now, and as mentioned earlier, with the President of Indonesia visiting last week, there were high hopes of some certainty for northern producers about export permits. Frustratingly, nothing official happened. But as Luke Bowen told the ABC's Christy O'Brien, the visit by SBY should still be viewed as a positive.
The President himself spoke at great length about the burgeoning demand that's growing in Indonesia, their requirement to feed more people, to provide more protein, to produce more protein for a growing population. And he seemed quite sincere in the fact that they genuinely believe that they can't meet that demand. It's going to be a challenge for them. We know it currently is a big challenge for them to meet their existing demand. So clearly there seems to be a place, not only for the increased production in Indonesia, but also increasing production from our end as well.
The Indonesian president wants to see more Australians investing in the Indonesian cattle industry. Is that something your members would support given their own financial constraints at the moment?
There are a lot of Australians already investing in Indonesia. There are at least 2 companies that are investing directly in joint ventures and processing as well within Indonesia right now. So there is some experience and some collective knowledge about how to do it within the cattle industry, but clearly the industry itself is going through a great deal of difficulty. We also know that there are challenges in investing in Indonesia. There's a lot of people who've been in Indonesia and haven't necessarily stayed there. I think part of the next stage for us is to sit down in an open, I think, and transparent way with Indonesia and talk through some of the existing opportunities and some of the obstacles and challenges to Australian industry investing in Indonesia, because clearly it's not an automatic, an easy thing to do necessarily. We need to understand the market. They need to understand our requirements as well. So clearly there's a bit of talk and a bit of work to do if we're going to expand this sort of dual pathway, if you like, in trade terms.
There was some suggestion by the President in his discussions that there could be a chance to expand into other Southeast Asian markets from Indonesia. So we supply the cattle and then they fatten them up and slaughter the cattle. Is that a likely market, do you think?
Well, clearly Indonesia is a gateway to other Southeast Asian countries, but also to a Muslim world. I mean, it is the largest Muslim country in the world, and clearly they have some expertise in feedlotting cattle. They have an abundant supply of feedstuffs, cheap, skilled and readily available labour in order to feedlot cattle and value add and process cattle. And I think there is certainly an opportunity to use it as a re-export hub. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. At the end of the day, there's some of the things that I think Indonesia and Australia collectively can be looking at.
The Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association has talked about the idea of sending a delegation over to Indonesia to try and get things back on track and improve those relationships primarily. Is that still on the cards?
The opportunity this week in having a lot of people in town, and particularly significantly the President and senior ministers and governors, was a wonderful opportunity to start furthering some of those connections. And I think this week has been very positive from that point of view.
The issue of permits is never far from mind. There's talk of 90,000 for the last 6 months. What's the worst case scenario for that quota and best case scenario?
Having those 90,000 head put into the next quarter leaves the last quarter of the 6 months open to potentially bring more cattle perhaps forward from next year into the last quarter of this year. And clearly that's a good outcome for the industry. Overall this year we've only got 283,000 head in total. That's down from 410 last year, down from 520 the year before, and 750,000 in 2009. So we've seen a major retraction in supply.
Now, the latest is that there may be an announcement on quotas this coming week. In the meantime, boats are heading to destinations other than Indonesia. Egypt has taken a bunch of heavier cattle. For the moment, Australia is cheaper than Brazil for this market. Incidentally, 2 big northern stations were up for sale last Friday in what was seen as a test of northern property values. Riverend and Inverway, both owned by the Underwood family, were offered at auction in Brisbane. Together, both properties are running about 40,000 head, and they would be considered quality assets. Neither attracted a bid, but in classic real estate jargon, negotiations are said to be continuing. Moving on now to silage action, where most indicators made solid gains last week as numbers available fell and competition picked up. As usual for this time of year, quality is an issue, although reports continue of some very good lines reaching processors in Queensland. Heavy steers regained some of the recent losses, while lot feeders were still active despite the freezing weather, and the cow market is very firm. The Eastern Market Indicator closed the week at $3.79. That's the highest level since mid-April and a fraction up on this week of last year. The lamb and sheep market was also a numbers game last week, with numbers easing 10%, and along with the pickup in restocker and feeder interest, the indicators had a nice lift. Buyers remain very selective because of quality, but the numbers told, and that spike for mutton is the best weekly gain for the year. Overseas now for sugar and cotton, and there's speculation the mini bull run for sugar is running out of steam while cotton prices continue to meander. Maybe the current stimulus packages out of China and Europe will give cotton some zing. So sugar is firm for the moment, while cotton is up slightly on last week. Finally now to wool, which had a mixed week with gains in the south and falls just on top of gains in the north. 22 and 23 microns did best in the market, where, as usual, it was China which led the buying, followed by Europe and India. So the Eastern Market Indicator closed at 1,077 cents a kilo, just up for the week, but well down, in fact, about 282 cents down on this week of 2011. And that's the Landline check on prices.